The Royals took care of the White Sox in resounding fashion over the weekend. Can it set him up for a hot second half? We'll talk about it in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That is Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube, as you know. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you are a first-time listener and want to know a little bit more about me and this show, well, I am based here in Kansas City. I work over at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, co-hosting, and some producing as well. So on the day-to-day, I stay pretty busy in the sports world. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, we're not talking about anything else other than 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Now, today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. And with PrizePicks, it's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. So you can go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. As promised, back on Friday, we said that Monday was going to be dedicated to recapping the White Sox series that took place Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at Kauffman Stadium to kick off the second half. We also are going to dive into a little bit about the news of Jordan Lyles. Really just a story that had so much unknown about it. It was a true mystery, and I'm not sure when we are going to get the full story on it. I will tell you from experience of being in the clubhouse, from being in some of those press conferences where questions were asked about Jordan Lyles, it was the same answer every single time, that they were going to respect Jordan Lyles' privacy. And at the end of the day, I think you just hope the best for Jordan Lyles. And I know some of the listeners and followers had been curious, what had happened. I would tell you that I think the only people that know what's going on is Jordan Lyles and the Royals organization in terms of the higher-ups. And maybe not even all the higher-ups know exactly what was going on with that situation, but the Royals released him. And maybe down the road we'll get more clarity, but hopefully just all is right with Jordan Lyles. I mean, this is kind of a frightening situation because of how quiet it was, a sad situation that, somebody just couldn't play for the entirety of the year, or chose not to play for the entirety of the year. And I don't know if this is it for the baseball career of Jordan Lyles. Of course, last year there were jokes and criticisms of him, but for a person, for a human being, yeah, I think you just hope that everything's all right with him, and that maybe someday down the road he can continue playing baseball again, because I'm sure it's something that brought him a lot of joy growing up and, of course, playing into his adult life. But we'll talk about that a little bit more coming up in segment number 2. And then in segment number 3, I got a very interesting stat with the pitching staff to show you how good this 2024 team has been and how bad 2023 was for the Royals. But to kick off today's show, let's talk about what happened over the weekend at Kauffman Stadium. And the Royals coming off a long week off. Everybody had that long week off of just resting up. Some of the Royals enjoying All-Star Game festivities. But for the most part, it was just kicking your feet up, relaxing, taking care of your body, and being ready to go on Friday when play resumed. And the Royals were blessed with the opportunity of playing one of the worst teams baseball has ever put together. And I shouldn't really say that baseball is put together, that Chicago assembled, or one of the Chicago teams assembled to putting out there in 2024. And I don't think it was any secret that the White Sox were going into this series with really nothing to play for. They know these are the final couple of weeks, final couple of days for that matter, that some of their stars are going to be in a White Sox uniform. And the second half is going to be filled with absolute misery for the Southsiders. And if you're a Royals fan who dislikes the White Sox, maybe you don't feel much sympathy for it. But for the matter at hand here, for the actual baseball part of this, the Royals could have come out flat. It would not have surprised me if the Royals walked into Friday. They're facing a guy like Chris Flexen who doesn't really jump off the page, and they could have looked at this White Sox team and said, look, we're already 6-1 against this team. We can just roll the bats and balls out. Let's play. We don't need any true strategy. We don't need to be as sharp as we usually are. I mean, we had beaten the Cardinals twice in one day. We had beaten Boston once on the road trip, though that's not really as impressive because you lost that series. But they could have had their chests puffed out a little bit and taken the White Sox for granted on the schedule. And even if they did take them for granted, I think they win 2 of 3 in that series. But for the Red Sox getting swept in LA, for the Guardians, losing a few times to the Padres, the Twins getting swept in a 2-game series against the Brewers, all of that ended up being a hell of a lot sweeter because the Royals took care of business and swept the Chicago White Sox. I'm not going to say that sweeping the Chicago White Sox is a sign of domination to come, but you had a 9-game homestand, and you couldn't have started it any better. And the fact that Boston, who you were chasing, lost 3 straight as well, and now you've leapfrogged them for the final wild card spot, and oh, by the way, you've tied the Twins now for second place in the Central and the second place wild card spot, you kind of feel like things are trending in a positive direction. And we're about to enter the month of August, 2 months to go, with the Royals either in a playoff spot or damn close to it. And you get 3 more to close out July against the White Sox, and then you'll be done. You don't get the White Sox in August. You don't get the White Sox in September. And I would feel like it's a little too extreme, a little too strong to say the Royals will sweep the White Sox in Chicago, because I believe beating a team 12 out of 13 times in the big leagues is almost unheard of. Eventually, that bad team gets you on the wrong day. It hasn't happened often for this year for the White Sox and the Royals. The White Sox only beat the Royals once, and it was in a doubleheader. It was game 2 of a doubleheader, and the Royals only lost by 1 run. So it's not like they caught the Royals on a bad day, because the Royals had beaten them just a few hours earlier before that game. But this series, against Chicago, Bobby Witt Jr. going 9 for 11 in the series. He had reached base 10 times. Absurd numbers. And the pitching staff, what more can you say? You get 7 shutout from Michael Wacha. You get 7 shutout from Brady Singer. And you get a complete game from Seth Lugo. I don't know if the rotation will severely regress in the second half. Seth Lugo made his 21st start yesterday afternoon. I mean, he's still pacing for over 30 starts. He's pacing for over 200 innings. He's pacing for over 15 wins. Yeah, there might be some slight regression, but we're coming up on 2 months left in the season. We're going into tonight at the 101 game mark of the season. It's not like we're at game 40 or game 50. It's not like we're back in May when the Royals were, 34 and 18, or what was it? 33, 34 and 18, something like that. 34 and 19, it might have been. Like, that was a smaller sample size. It was decently notable. I think that you could look at those first 55-ish games and say, well, there's enough to take away at that point. But 100 games is a hell of a lot different. And the Royals doing what they needed to do to open the second half gives you a lot of confidence for what they might be able to do going into August and going into September. The trade deadline is approaching. We're going to have more episodes this week and next week leading up to it of any more rumors the Royals may have surrounding them, players they may be interested in, or players that make sense for a second half push. But I can't have any complaints by what we saw on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Yeah, you could say the first 6 innings were frustrating yesterday against Drew Thorpe, but did anybody really feel nervous or anxious that the Royals weren't going to come back? I mean, the White Sox bullpen protecting a 1-run lead. I look at it too, and I wonder, when the White Sox trade away Garrett Crochet, they trade away Luis Robert, they trade away Tommy Pham, maybe they trade away Paul DeJong and Andrew Vaughn, maybe they trade away Gavin Sheets. I mean, it's going to be a fire sale for them. Michael Kopech's another one. That's probably the end of the list. Eric Fetty actually would be another one that pops up in my mind. They could try to trade Chris Flexen. I don't think they'd get much for him. But I do wonder at that point, how bad can it really get for Pedro Grifol and the White Sox? I mean, I say every time we kick off the show that it's 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. I would almost think it would be interesting to tie a White Sox segment in about Pedro Grifol and and the job that he has done in 2 years in Chicago. I think this team, God, in the second half, after they trade away their star players, can they even get to 45 wins or, maybe even 42 wins or something like that? I mean, they kind of resemble the 2003 Tigers that lost, I think, 119 games. But at the same time, they really don't. I still think there were some guys on that Tigers team that were worth keeping around. And it seems like the White Sox are going to have a fire sale. We'll have to piece together that roster the rest of the way. But the Royals will see him 3 more times. Fingers crossed they can finish up the season against one of the league's most historically awful teams, winning 12 of the 13 contests. But we'll have to wait a few weeks until they make that final trip to Guaranteed Rate Field to take on the Chicago White Sox. But no issues whatsoever in the 3-game series to open up the second half as the Royals sweep Chicago right out of Kansas City. They go a perfect 7-0 against the Sox at Kauffman Stadium in 2024. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, I'm going to give you my take on Jordan Lyles and why it was so confusing and so much of a mystery in 2024. We'll dive into it next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Got a few sponsors I want to give a shout out to, starting with PrizePicks. It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's also the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can also get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. And you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. And you can turn $10 into $1,000. And if you're looking for promotions, PrizePicks has got you covered every week. From lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays to helping your lineup hit or getting your entry fees back, you have a losing lineup on Fridays. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks for a deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It is that easy. Also want to tell you about eBay Motors' passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive, and eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your #1 ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive today at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And a reminder that eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. I did think about kicking off my show with this story, but I also don't know how much I have to add on it because it was such a mystery. It was left up to taking a guess on what it would be. It was kind of up to your imagination. And I know for a lot of people out there, including people that follow me, you wanted to know more about this story involving Jordan Lyles. How Jordan Lyles walked away in April. We never really got an update. It seemed like questions were not asked, but I can tell you confidently, questions were asked, but it was the same answer every single time. And, the organization, I think, was pretty open and candid about the fact of, well, when we get an update, when we get information that he would like us to share or that it would be beneficial for the public to know, then we will give you that information. But the more of this story that came out, and Andy Rogers had a great article on this, beat reporter, of course, for MLB.com on the Royals, it sounded like the Royals didn't have much contact with Jordan Lyles. And when he was put on the restricted list, which, by the way, he was on since April 20th, it was described as a personal matter. And I think that alone allowed at least me to go, all right, if it's a personal matter, and they're not being open about it, sometimes you just have to say, okay, we are going to leave it alone. If this player is really going through something and it's not really beneficial to the public as to what they're going through, I think at times you can leave it alone. Um, there are other times I think that answers have to be provided uh, kind of front and center. And it's unfair because in baseball, I think the talent level of the player will really dictate that. This sounds very shallow of me to say, but if a player who was a star of this team, right, I think you know who I'm referring to, walked away from baseball on April 20th, and there was no sign of him, there was no comment, there was no answer. I think we'd have more of an uproar. Obviously, I mean, answers would have to be provided if your star player had walked away. But Jordan Lyles to me was different. Jordan Lyles was throwing in long relief. He had pitched just fine in the couple outings he threw in April. I thought his new role in the bullpen was going to be helpful to the Royals because he was seen as this guy last year that could just eat innings, not always effectively, but he could get outs and really wear it. And when the Royals were getting beaten up on, kind of felt like Jordan Lyles could be a guy you could turn to and you wouldn't have to worry about your bullpen getting damaged the rest of the way. But the personal matter clearly was severe enough where information was not going to be provided, nothing further than that. And the club was very respectful of his privacy. But I think what caught me off guard was that Lyles wasn't really in contact with the organization. And when the Royals had to make a move with this restricted list, that's why they went ahead and released him, because it seems like he's nowhere near returning to action. And this will probably be the last time we talk about Jordan Lyles because he's no longer a Royal. And if there is more information coming out about it, I think it'll be worthy of a podcast segment and maybe one to kick off the show with. But the reason I had, pivoted to this being my second segment is that I have the same amount of information as I did back on April 20th, which is not anything of substance, not anything that really would make you raise your eyebrows. It's a big time mystery. I mean, even in this article by Andy Rogers, that Lyles reported the Royals complex in Arizona in June to start pitching again because he was on the restricted list, but the MLB rules dictated he had 30 days to work his way back before the Royals had to make a roster decision. And at the end of 30 days, they either had to activate him back onto the 40-man and the 26-man roster or release him. A player on the restricted list cannot go on a rehab assignment, and Lyles has more than 5 years of service time, meaning he cannot be optioned in the minor leagues without his consent. What I gathered from there, he was at the Arizona League complex. He was trying to work his way back. And when it got to that 30-day threshold, the Royals decided to release him because it wasn't a situation where he could go on a minor league assignment without his consent. He can't go on a rehab assignment. And that would have meant him getting right back up to the big league level after basically 3 months off. And who knows how effective he would look. And I'm not sure Jordan Lyles with a 3 months absence would be in the best interest of the Royals. And I'm sure that's what they anticipated. But from what we also gathered was that it just didn't seem like he was ready to jump back into it. And I think down the road, now that he is no longer affiliated with the organization, there could be more answers out there. But I can tell you with confidence that there were people asking questions about it, but it was the same answer over and over again. And, working in media before, I do think that, some reporters, some, broadcasting personnel, they may ask multiple times, every single day to get an answer there. But it was the same answer all the time. And at some point, you do have to move on and go, well, you're not going to get much from it. And maybe you put faith and trust in the hands of an organization that would give you the information when it's needed. And it was never really needed until now that he was released. And maybe down the road, you'll get more information out there. But I always thought it was foolish for me when asked about those questions because there are people more dialed in to that situation. I think there are fantastic reporters that cover this team, fantastic, media outlets that cover this team, and meeting them personally. It's a long season. And, the organization from meeting a couple of the higher ups and the Royals organization, I don't think they wanted to just get swept under the rug and moved on from it. I don't think they had much to provide an update with it. And speculation is a dangerous thing because you don't know if it's true or not. And if I don't personally know the person or the player, I think it's kind of pointless to do. So when I was asked in the past about Jordan Lyles, where do you think he is there an update? It really was no. And instead of me saying, well, I think it could be this, or it sounds like it's this, it could be that answer. But also, this, my opinion would be no different than any other average Joe who had an opinion on it because I didn't have the intel on it. And I'm not sure a lot of people did. And like I said, now that he is no longer with the organization and the baseball season is on the back half of the year, eventually that stuff may come out. If he returns to baseball, I think that stuff would come out or what he was gone from for such a long time. But it was a curious case. I think this is something I've never really seen before. We've seen players step away from baseball. I'm not saying that it's, uncharted territory, but this almost felt like a different beast of a guy going on the restricted list. And back then, they said, we do not expect him back for a while. We're going to be without him for quite some time. And he never returned. He threw his last pitch for the Royals in April, and I don't think anybody saw it coming. But I think good on the Royals for respecting the privacy. I think good on a lot of people for respecting the privacy of Jordan Lyles, because sometimes it's just information you don't need to know until it's out there for you. And maybe that gets reported by the Royals. Maybe it's reported by him himself, but we don't know. It was interesting, though, that he was back at the Arizona League complex throwing in June, but he wasn't ready enough, clearly, for the Royals to activate him and put him on the roster. So they decided to release him, and they did that this past weekend. But again, if more information comes out, we, of course, will do a segment on it. We will do an episode on it. But as of right now, there's not much. If I'm being brutally honest with you, I'm still in the dark about this. I don't know what happened. I don't know what those 3 months looked like, but Jordan Lyles is no longer a Royal, and he likely won't be at any other point for the rest of his career if he does continue to pitch professionally, whether it be in the minor leagues or the major leagues. I believe he's thrown his last pitch for the Royals. Well, before we move on to our final segment, I want to give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. When we come back, I have an interesting stat that shows you how good the 2024 rotation has been and how bad the 2023 pitching staff was as a whole. That's next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. One last shout out to one of our sponsors today in FanDuel. You know I love sports, and I love them so much that, of course, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs have completely come to an end on all those winter sports, though now you get the NBA Summer League, and we do have baseball playoffs right around the corner, it's going to start ramping back up. But even though the sports aren't sportsing around the world like we all want them to, FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime that I am in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And if you're interested in maybe throwing down some money in tonight's game between the Royals and the Diamondbacks, maybe put the over on strikeout total for Cole Reagans, because he always seems to go over with that total. I did some digging this morning, just on a Monday. I like to try to find any nuggets or any stats out there that might be intriguing to the listeners and the followers out there. And one that really caught my eye, and I think it shows you the drastic improvement from 2023 to 2024, and maybe how underappreciated it's really been. I went through FanGraphs today, and I wanted to see where Bobby Witt Jr. was in the overall, WAR race. And Aaron Judge is number one in all of baseball in total WAR. Gunnar Henderson right behind him, and Bobby Witt Jr. really close to tying Gunnar Henderson now, but still in third place. And then I had seen that Cole Reagans was top 20 in WAR as well. So I thought to myself, with him just being a pitcher, I'm curious where the pitchers stack up in overall WAR. And lo and behold, both Cole Reagans and Seth Lugo were top 10 in WAR. And Cole Ragans has the highest WAR among Royals pitchers right now at 3.5. Seth Lugo, despite having more innings, despite having more wins, the lower ERA, he is 3.2. So Cole Ragans and Seth Lugo combined are 6.7. So 6.7 wins above replacement on Fangraphs. Here is what caught me off guard. How bad the 2023 pitching staff was. Not just the rotation, the pitching staff. So like I said, Ragans, Lugo, both top 10 this year in WAR. Pitching WAR, that is. 6.7 in 100 games, I might add. So just 100 games at 6.7 WAR total. In 2023, a combination of these pitchers, Jordan Lyles, Brady Singer, Zach Greinke, Alec Marsh, Cole Ragans. Those are the 5 starters in the rotation. But I'm also going to throw in Carlos Hernandez, Taylor Clark, Daniel Lynch, Ryan Yarbrough, Brad Keller, Angel Serpa, Jose Cuas, Scott Barlow. All of those pitchers combined to equal 6.6 in wins above replacement, might I add, in 162 games. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 pitchers. By the way, those were the 13 pitchers with the most innings on the Royals last year. I'm not just nitpicking and finding guys that threw 2 innings and had a negative 0.1 WAR. These were the 13 pitchers who had the most innings last year for the Royals. And they equaled less than what 2 starters have done for the Royals in 100 games. 100 games. Now, of course, they haven't thrown in all 100 games, but doesn't that make it more impressive? Seth Lugo has 21 starts this year, so 21 games he's appeared in. Cole Ragans, to my knowledge, should be around 20 to 21, and I'm doing this on the fly. Tonight will be Cole Ragans's, I'm going to guess, 21st start as well on the season. Yes, tonight will be start 21. So 41 games combined with Ragans and Lugo, they equaled more WAR than 13 guys in the 2023 pitching staff. That goes to show you how drastic this change has been, but how dauntingly awful 2023 was. I mean, your 5 starters, and really it bounced around a little bit because Lyles and Greinke and Singer were the only 3 that were consistent in the rotation all season long. And that's consistently in the rotation, not bringing a level of consistency that Ragans and Lugo have. Marsh and Ragans joined the staff later, and might I add, Cole Ragans, after making his first start for the Royals on July 15th of 2023, finished with the most pitching WAR on the team. The guy who didn't even throw an inning for the Royals until mid-July finished with more WAR than Jordan Lyles, Brady Singer, Zach Greinke, Brad Keller, Daniel Lynch. In fact, let me add this in. Chris Bubich, in 16 innings for the Royals, had a 0.5 WAR. Jordan Lyles, pitching the entire year, had a 0.2 WAR. So Chris Bubich in those 16 innings in April had more WAR. That to me was jaw-dropping. 2 pitchers, 2 starters for the Royals, yes, they're 2 best, have more WAR in 100 games this year. 21 starts apiece after tonight, but 41 going into this tweet. And yet Lyles, Singer, Greinke, Marsh, Ragans, Hernandez, Clark, Lynch, Yarbrough, Keller, Zerpa, Cuas, Barlow worth less in overall wins above replacement. That's all on Fangraphs. And that was the entire season. If you want to know how unbelievable this jump has been from 2023 to 2024, you don't have to look any further than what this pitching staff has done. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. You can always find us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. One last shout out to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you canvas analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tomorrow, we're going to break down game 1 of the series between Arizona and Kansas City, and maybe more on this trade deadline as it's supposed to heat up this week. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.